What do you actually know about a country whose name you can find on cargo ships in every port on Earth, yet whose interior most of the world has never seen? Panama sits on a narrow isthmus between two oceans, a ribbon of land barely 40 miles wide at its thinnest point, bordered by Costa Rica to the west and Colombia to the east, with the Caribbean Sea lapping its northern shore and the Pacific curling along its south. It is the hinge of two continents and two oceans at once, a place where a single canal moves a significant share of global trade in a day, rivaling the annual economic activity of many nations. But if you only see it as the canal, you will miss almost everything that actually makes it Panama. The mist rising over coffee terraces in Chiriquí, the rhythm of a fishing panga returning at dawn, the language of the Guna and the Ngebe still spoken on islands and in mountain villages, the smell of sancocho simmering in a pot that has fed 4 generations of the same family. The morning begins in Panama City, the way it begins in most great crossroads cities, with noise arriving before light does. Diablo Rojo buses, retired American school buses, repainted in wild murals of saints, cartoon characters, and local slang, rattle down the Cinta Costera with reggaeton bleeding from their speakers. Street vendors set up carts of chichemi and cut mango along Avenida Central, while, a few blocks away, the glass towers of Punta Pacifica catch the first light. Like something out of Miami or Singapore, cities Panama's skyline is often compared to for sheer density of capital passing through so small a footprint. Taxis and rideshare drivers idle outside hotel lobbies, waiting for executives flying in for a single day of meetings before flying out again, part of a rhythm the city has grown around rather than merely accommodated. Container ships queue offshore, waiting their turn through the canal, while bankers in the financial district settle into offices that manage money for a significant portion of Central America and the Caribbean. In the old quarter of Casco Viejo, laundry still hangs between colonial balconies, just blocks from rooftop bars serving cocktails to foreign executives, and the smell of frying empanadas drifts out from doorways before most offices have even opened. Panama City does not announce its importance. It simply moves, ship by ship, deal by deal, bus by battered bus. Leave behind the traffic and glass of the capital and travel west, up into the highlands of Chiriquí province, and the air itself changes character. It thins and cools around Volcan Baru, Panama's highest point, and the pace of life slows to match the altitude. This is coffee country. Around the town of Boquete, small family farms tend rows of geisha coffee plants on volcanic soil so fertile that the beans have gone on to fetch some of the highest prices ever paid for coffee at international auction. Pickers move through the rows by hand, red cherries dropped one at a time into woven baskets slung at the hip, a harvest that still depends on human patience in an age that prizes speed above almost everything else. Many of those pickers travel each season from Ngebe Bugle communities further into the mountains, following the harvest the way their parents did, work that is exhausting and seasonal but tied, in a way, factory work rarely is, to the actual land it depends on. Below Boquete, in the valley towns, the pace is gentler still. Roosters mark the hour more reliably than any clock, and neighbors greet each other by name. On roads that see more horses than cars. A country is rarely defined by its capital alone. It is defined by the places its capital forgets to photograph. The coast tells a different story from the mountains. Along the Azuero Peninsula and out toward the Gulf of Panama, fishing communities set their days by the tide rather than the clock. Fishermen head out before sunrise in small wooden boats called pangas, working nets for corvina and pago, while others free dive for octopus along the rocky shallows. In towns like Pedasi and out around the islands of the Pearl Archipelago, the catch comes in by mid-morning and is sold straight off the boat, still glistening, to buyers who barter in the open air rather than behind a counter. Bocas del Toro on the Caribbean side adds its own rhythm, a slower, more Afro-Caribbean cadence, with dugout cayucos gliding between mangrove channels and the scent of coconut and salt water hanging over everything. Here the tide dictates more than the catch. It decides which channels are passable by boat at all, and fishermen learn its patterns the way city dwellers learn a bus schedule out of daily necessity rather than curiosity. Older fishermen still talk about the Maria, the tide, as if it were a relative whose moods simply have to be managed rather than fought. What ties the highlands to the coast, the capital to the village, is not geography, it is family. Panamanian households are frequently multi-generational, grandparents, parents and children under one roof, and the neighborhood itself functions as an extension of that household. In rural communities, the old tradition of the junta still survives, neighbors gathering unpaid to help one family plant a field, raise a roof, or bring in a harvest, with the understanding that the favor will be returned in kind when someone else needs it. The public market, or mercado, is not simply where people buy food. It is where news travels, community ties are strengthened, and children learn who their community actually is, long before they learn it from a screen. A house is not just built with materials, it is built by the people who show up to build it. No conversation about how Panamanians live can skip the table, because the table is where the country explains itself. Panamanian cuisine carries the fingerprints of its history: Spanish colonization, West African heritage, indigenous root crops, Chinese immigration, and Caribbean influence from the canal era, all folded into one plate. Sancocho de gallina, a golden broth of chicken, ñame, and culantro, is the dish most Panamanians will tell you feels like home, traditionally simmered on Sundays and shared across a full table of relatives. It is the country's signature emotional dish, the one people crave when they are far from it. Alongside it sits ropa vieja, shredded beef stewed slowly in tomato and pepper until it falls apart on the fork. Ceviche, made fresh with corvina, lime, and onion, is sold from small stands along the Cinta Costera and eaten standing up in paper cups at any hour of the day. Patacones, twice-fried green plantains, flattened and crisped, appear beside almost every meal, alongside carimañolas, yuca fritters stuffed with seasoned meat and fried to a shattering crust. Tamales panameños, corn dough filled with chicken or pork, are steamed wrapped in bijao leaves rather than corn husks, a detail that separates them instantly from their Mexican cousins. For breakfast, hojaldras, fried dough dusted with sugar, are eaten alongside eggs and coffee, while arroz con guandu, rice cooked with pigeon peas and coconut milk, carries the unmistakable stamp of Caribbean influence, especially strong around Colón and Bocas del Toro. On a hot afternoon, chicheme, a sweet corn drink thickened with milk and cinnamon, or a raspao, shaved ice drenched in fruit syrup and condensed milk, is sold from carts pushed slowly down residential streets, the vendor's bell doing more advertising than any sign ever could. Working-class Panamanians eat most of their daily meals not in restaurants, but in fondas, small family-run diners serving a rotating menu of stewed meats, rice, and beans at prices that make eating out an everyday habit rather than an occasion. Along the coasts, guacho de mariscos, a thick risotto-like rice cooked down with shellfish and coconut, shows up at family gatherings the way sancocho does inland, while empanadas, filled with beef, chicken, or cheese and fried until the corn dough blisters, are sold from paper bags outside schools and bus terminals for the price of pocket change. And no discussion of Panamanian food is complete without its prestige export. Coffee, particularly the geisha varietals grown in Boquete, which has gone from a regional crop to one of the most sought-after coffees on the planet, carrying the flavor of a Panamanian mountainside into cups from Tokyo to New York. Spanish is Panama's official language, spoken with a cadence and slang distinct from its Central American neighbors, full of borrowed English words left over from decades of American presence around the canal. But Spanish is only the loudest of Panama's languages, not the only one. Ngabere is spoken by the Nyabe Buglé, the country's largest indigenous population. Guna, sometimes written Kuna, is spoken across the San Blas Islands. Embera and Wunan are spoken in communities along the rivers of the Darién. And in Bocas del Toro and Colon, communities descended from Barbadian, Jamaican, and other West Indian laborers still speak a Panamanian Creole English, sometimes called Guari Guari, a living reminder of the workers who came to build the canal and stayed to build families instead. To understand indigenous Panama, travel out to the San Blas archipelago, known formally as Gunayala, a chain of some 365 low coral islands governed not by Panama City but by the Guna people themselves. Guna women are internationally known for the mola, a reverse applique textile made by layering and cutting fabric to reveal geometric and animal patterns beneath, an art form so intricate that a single mola panel can take weeks to complete by hand. That autonomy was not given freely. In February 1925, the Guna rose up against Panamanian authorities who were forcibly suppressing their language, dress, and customs, an uprising remembered as the Tula Revolution or Guna Revolution. Led by figures including Nelakan Tule, the Guna briefly declared an independent Republic of Tule before a peace agreement, signed that March guaranteed their right to self-governance, a right the Guna General Congress still exercises today, a full century later. Now Gunayala faces a newer threat than any colonial government: rising seas. Several of its islands have already begun to flood at high tide, and in recent years entire communities, including the island of Gadi Sugdub, have begun relocating to the Panamanian mainland, trading centuries of island life for higher, safer ground. Inland, along the rivers of the Chagres and deeper into the Darién, Embera and Wunan communities keep a different set of traditions alive: oral storytelling passed from elders to children in the evenings, cocobolo wood carved into intricate animal figures, and the temperi geometric body painting made from crushed jaguar fruit, worn for ceremonies and everyday life alike. Among the Nyabe Buglé, Panama's largest single indigenous group, communal chicha gatherings and coming-of-age ceremonies for young women remain central to identity, marked by ritual dress, dance, and days of shared food that pull an entire community's attention away from work and toward memory. Elders hold a particular authority in these settings that no schoolbook can replace. A grandmother's account of a flood, a migration, or a harvest failure carries the weight of both history and instruction, told again and again until the youngest listeners can recite it themselves. It is kept alive not through museums, but through grandparents insisting, generation after generation, that the stories still matter. Panama's most recognizable traditional garment is the polera, an elaborately embroidered dress associated above all with the Azuero Peninsula, particularly the town of Las Tablas, where a single hand-sewn polera can take months of labor and is treated as a family heirloom passed down for generations. Here is the twist most visitors never learn. The so-called Panama hat the woven straw hat that gave the country its accidental global brand, is not actually Panamanian at all. It originates in Ecuador, made traditionally from toquilla straw, and only earned its misleading name because it was shipped through the Panama Canal and worn by workers and travelers passing through on their way to the California gold rush and later the canal's own construction. The real national headwear when Panamanians dress traditionally tends toward the woven sombrero pintado, made in Azuero towns like La Pintada. Its dark natural fibers, a quieter, more authentically local counterpart to a hat the world wrongly claims as Panama's own. Sometimes the symbol a country is famous for was never really theirs to begin with. Music in Panama moves between two very different heartbeats. The tamborito, accompanied by drums and call and response singing, is considered the national dance, performed in poleras at festivals across the Azuero region. While Majorana music, played on a small 5-string guitar of the same name, carries some of the oldest folk traditions in the country. Layered over that older rhythm is a newer, louder Panama, one that helped invent an entire genre. Panama is widely credited as the birthplace of Spanish-language reggae, born in the 1970s and 80s when Panamanian artists began translating Jamaican reggae into Spanish, a sound pioneered by artists like El General, whose Spanish reggae hits in the early 1990s spread across Latin America and helped lay the groundwork for what the world now calls reggaeton. Panama also gave the world Ruben Blades, whose fusion of salsa with socially conscious lyrics on records built alongside New York's Fania label made him one of the most influential songwriters in the history of Latin music. Alongside him, artists like Nando Boom carried Spanish reggae further into the mainstream through the 1990s, feeding directly into the sound that would eventually explode worldwide as reggaeton, a genre whose roots trace back, in no small part, to Panamanian sound systems and dance halls decades before the rest of the world caught on. It is proof that a small country's music can still reshape a continent's soundtrack. Faith and celebration in Panama both center on real, specific places. Every October 21st, pilgrims travel to the town of Portobello on the Caribbean coast to honor the Cristo Negro, the Black Christ, a wooden statue whose origins are wrapped in local legend but whose devotion is unmistakably real, drawing thousands who walk for miles, some on their knees, in fulfillment of vows made during hardship. In stark contrast to that solemn pilgrimage stands Carnival, and nowhere is it bigger than in Las Tablas, where two rival neighborhoods, Calle Arriba and Calle Abajo, compete each year with elaborate floats, poleras, and crowned carnival queens, while Culecos, water trucks spraying crowds in the midday heat, turn entire streets into a shared, soaking celebration that has nothing solemn about it at all. Panama's geography is not just cultural, it is biological. As the land bridge that connected North and South America roughly 3 million years ago, Panama triggered what scientists call the Great American Biotic Interchange, allowing species from both continents to cross and mix in a way that reshaped the wildlife of an entire hemisphere. That legacy survives today in places like Coiba National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site off the Pacific coast where sharks, humpback whales, and endemic species thrive largely undisturbed, and Barrow, Colorado Island, an artificial island in the canal's Gatun Lake that has become one of the most studied tropical research stations on Earth. Further into the highlands, the cloud forests around Boquete and the Fortuna Reserve shelter the resplendent quetzal, a bird so vividly colored that early Mesoamerican cultures considered it sacred, drawing bird watchers who will wait silent for hours for a few seconds of iridescent green. The harpy eagle, Panama's national bird, still hunts in the dense canopy of the Darién, though it, like much of the country's forest, faces mounting pressure from illegal logging, mining expansion, and the steady creep of deforestation that shrinks its hunting grounds year by year. Large-scale copper mining in Panama's interior forests has, in recent years, become one of the country's most contentious environmental fights, pitting jobs and government revenue against watersheds and indigenous land that once seemed permanent. Panama's history did not begin with a canal. Long before Europeans arrived, indigenous trade networks moved gold, salt, and cacao across the isthmus, and after Spanish colonization, it became the Camino Real, the royal road over which Peruvian silver crossed on its way to ships bound for Spain, making Panama one of the wealthiest and most fought-over transit points in the entire empire. Panama declared independence from Spain in 1821, joining Gran Colombia before separating decisively from Colombia in 1903 with American backing, a split that cleared the way for the canal itself. That canal, completed in 1914 after a French attempt had collapsed decades earlier under disease and financial ruin, remains the single event most associated with modern Panama. But the canal's story is incomplete without its hidden labor history. Tens of thousands of West Indian workers, largely from Barbados and Jamaica, dug, blasted, and built the canal under brutal conditions, facing yellow fever, malaria, and racial segregation within the very work camps built to house them, and thousands died in the effort. They arrived by the shipload from Barbados especially, recruited with promises of steady wages, and found instead a rigid, segregated pay system that paid white American workers in gold and almost everyone else, including West Indian laborers, in silver, a divide so entrenched it became known simply as the gold roll and the silver roll. Many of those laborers never left. They settled in Colón and Bocas del Toro, married, raised families, and built churches and social clubs that still stand today, their descendants woven into Panama's coastal communities, their Creole language and cuisine a permanent, under-acknowledged inheritance from the people whose hands actually built the country's defining achievement. Modern Panama runs on that same channel of water. The canal, along with the Colón Free Trade Zone, one of the largest free trade zones anywhere in the world, makes Panama a linchpin of global shipping, banking, and logistics, an economy built on things passing through rather than staying put. But step outside Panama City, and that global machinery gives way almost immediately to something far more local: small-scale rice and corn farming in the interior, subsistence fishing along both coasts, and informal markets, where a family's entire income might rest on a single cart of fruit or a folding table of fried snacks sold outside a school gate. A single family might have one member working logistics for an international shipping firm in Panama City, while a cousin, 3 hours away by bus, still plants rice by hand on a hillside that has belonged to the family for generations. Two economies, one household, rarely as far apart as the numbers on a balance sheet would suggest. The contrasts pile up the moment you start looking for them. A Diablo Rojo bus, decades old and hand-painted, idles at a red light beside a brand-new Tesla. A grandmother in a hand-embroidered polera crosses paths with a teenager, filming herself for social media in Panama City's financial district. Glass towers rise a few miles from wooden stilt houses along the coast, and a container ship the length of several football fields glides silently past fishermen, hauling in a net by hand. Inside the canal itself, a modern lock system built in the 21st century to handle today's largest cargo vessels operates only a short distance from the original 1914 locks, still functioning, still carrying smaller ships across the isthmus more than a century after they first opened. Old and new do not replace each other here. They simply keep working side by side. Panama does not hide these contrasts. It simply lives inside them every single day. Panama's young people are pulled, like young people everywhere, between two directions at once, toward global trends in music, fashion, and technology that arrive instantly through their phones, and toward the pull of family land, language, and tradition that their grandparents still insist matters. Many pursue careers in logistics, finance, tourism, and law, drawn by the same global economy that built the capital's skyline, while others leave rural provinces for the city entirely, chasing opportunity their hometowns simply cannot offer. Real challenges follow them regardless of the path they choose: economic inequality that leaves rural and indigenous communities far behind urban wealth, gaps in infrastructure and clean water access outside the capital, environmental pressure from mining and deforestation, and the slow erosion of indigenous languages as younger generations grow up more connected to Spanish and to English than to Ngebere or Guna. Panama's location as the narrowest link between South and North America has also placed it at the center of a modern migration route, with the dense rainforest of the Darién Gap now crossed each year by tens of thousands of migrants heading north, a humanitarian and logistical strain that rural communities along that route feel far more directly than the capital ever does. So why do people stay in a country whose neighbors so often overshadow it in headlines? Ask them, and the answers rarely mention the canal at all. They talk about a mother's sancocho on a Sunday afternoon, about a language spoken nowhere else on Earth, kept alive island by island, about a polera stitched by hand and worn once a year, and a drumbeat that has not changed in generations, about family, about land, about a coastline that feeds them, and a mountain that grows their coffee. Panama was never just the bridge between two oceans. It was always the country living quietly on either side of it. A nation that let the world use its shortest distance between two seas while keeping its longest traditions mostly to itself. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end of this journey through Panama's hidden soul. If the mist over Boquete's coffee farms, the drumbeat of a tamborito, or the quiet resilience of the Guna moved you the way it moved us in making this, there is a simple way to see more of it. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next deep dive into the countries the rest of the world thinks it already understands.